So if we put Beverly into the first quadrant position or the first step position, either name will work, then we can start looking at testing the end fill. So we'll have the patient laying on their side. So if this is an ERSL, they would lay on their left side so that I can rotate them to the right. We want to flex them and right rotate them. So we will bring this arm forward, the upper arm will hang down, and we'll pull the lower arm basically parallel with the bed, more or less straight around, to produce that rotation in flexion. We can then let the patient's arm come back and they can hold their wrist. Slide your arm now through their arm to stabilise their trunk. And then from the bottom, we also want to flex because we want to really crank the whole spine into a flexed, rotated position. So from here, we will basically have them straighten out the bottom leg a little and flex the top leg up so that the bottom leg will come with it. So we've got the spine in full flexion, and then we can increase the rotation by pulling the pelvis forwards. Now in this position, I can test the passive physiological movement simply by rotating that segment on itself. So right now I'm testing the physiological movement of right rotation. I can compare it with the one above and below and get an appropriate end fill like so. If we have reduced movement, then what we will need to do then is determine why it's reduced. Is it a myofascial or an extra-articular hypomobility, or is it articular? We can test this by checking the arthrokinematic. And this is basically a PA in the plane of the joint now, or in the plane of the segment. So from this position, I'll simply push the vertebra through along the plane of the joint, which will be basically in flexion, this sort of obliqueness, through this direction. And we can feel that. If the arthrokinematic is hypomobile, then we know basically that we have an articular hypomobility. If the arthrokinematic feels good, but the passive physiological movement is restricted, then we know that we're dealing with an extra-articular or a myofascial hypomobility. Let's assume, though, that what we found this time was an FRSL, and we want to assess for that. We'll bring the patient back onto the left side again. But this time we need to extend and rotate. So we'll take this arm back and bring this lower arm basically straight to the ceiling to rotate in extension. And at the bottom, we will straighten the bottom leg out and extend via the bottom leg so that we extend the spine. And again, rotate. And essentially then we can do exactly the same thing. Test the passive physiological movement, compare it above and below, and if it's restricted, then we can do the arthrokinematic test, which will be a change in the glide now, a little bit more oblique and upwards, and we can check the glide to determine the type of hypomobility we're dealing with.